Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by a French professor who's doing a video with two different publics in mind. The one public is you, the YouTube public. Probably like 1,000 of you are going to be tuning in. And then the other public is the around 20 students who didn't make it to class today in my hip hop class. It's the day before spring break over here. Even though it's like a snow globe, it's snowing so bad. I had a lot of students who missed class, and I missed most of the week going to my dad's funeral. So I'm going to show them the grace that they showed me by providing a sort of online version of today's class. So if you are in class today, you don't have to watch this. But if you want to make up for the credit that you missed for being absent, just take notes and put those notes in a Dropbox at Brightspace. But let's get to the video in general, because we're talking about something pretty interesting. We're talking about Tupac Shakur. And in particular, I want to sort of answer this question that I've often wondered myself. What is it about Tupac? You know, like why is he such an icon? Why is he such an important figure? I asked my students at the beginning of class today why. And so why don't you tell me in the comments and smash the like button and subscribe and all that? Like, you tell me, like, what is it for you about Tupac that makes him so special and so important? I should preface this by saying that this class has been interesting because I've taught a lot of things that I've loved my whole life. I get to teach Wu-Tang Clan and Jay-Z and Run DMC, etc. But then sometimes I'm teaching things that I don't know or that I ignored when I was younger. And I completely ignored Tupac. I didn't pay attention to him before he died. I didn't pay much attention to him after he died, up until a very specific moment, which I will tell you about later in this video. So it's interesting because when I ask, like, what is it about Tupac? I don't really have an answer for you because he's never really, done it for me. And this has been interesting exploration as to why is it that I have not responded that much to his greatness, because obviously he is great. And I've come to realize that over the years. And I'm certainly not saying that he's not great. But whatever the thing is about him, it didn't quite capture me. Now, my students gave a bunch of answers, because he's real, because he's relatable, because he died. I definitely think one of the most important things is that he just sort of had it. And I think it is a combination of attractiveness and charisma. I think he was able to move in different worlds thanks to his education, sort of in different environments with different people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. But really what I want to do with today's class or with today's video is sort of break Tupac into three different parts: the activist, the actor, and the thug. Just so you know, I'm not using thug as a weirdly racialized dog whistle. I'm referring to this specifically to the way that Tupac himself used the word thug, which I will define later. And I'm going to be putting a special emphasis on the word actor. I will just say that when I think of Tupac, I think actor. That's the first word that comes to mind. And I've never seen a single movie he starred in. Never seen Poetic Justice, never seen Juice, never seen Gridlocked. I have seen Baby Boy, which he was going to star in. Anyways, so let's get started, right? Let's get started with my favorite picture of Tupac. To try to understand, like what is it about him that makes him so interesting? Because this is the last class before the end of the first half of the semester here. And in a lot of ways, Tupac's story is the story of the entire class. So look at this cute little baby here. This cute little, right before I recorded this, I was upstairs playing around with my chubby little baby right around this age. I just want you to look at this little baby. And what I want you to notice, what is that? No, stop. What I want you to notice is that little bumper sticker, that little button, a little teeny kitty cat on there. Because I think the real importance about Tupac, okay, yes, he's released 6 albums since he died. That's pretty impressive. One could say he has a great legacy after his death. But I actually think he has maybe a more important legacy before he was born. I think he tells a more interesting story before he was born than he did after he died. Let me explain how. Because Because to really understand Tupac's story, you have to go to his mother. Okay, here's some pictures of Afeni Shakur in 1971 after her acquittal. And let's talk about Tupac before life and really focus on this woman, Alice Faye Williams. Now, you'll notice I misspelled Williams. I'm not going to correct that because that's not her name. Okay. She changed her name to Afeni Shakur, like many Black militants in the 60s and before and after, rejecting her slave name and taking a different name. Okay. So that's his mother, but she's such an interesting character if you read about her history. I mean, she should be on a stamp. I'm just saying. So it's a big theme in my channel, sort of, how underrepresented a lot of great Black Americans are in terms of representation on a stamp, which is a representation of sort of being accepted as part of American culture. I really think she belongs there. Now, who was she? Well, she was one of the Panther 21. I'm going to go forward and say that we should actually be talking about the Panther 22. There was a 22nd Panther who was jailed, but this is the really important story to understand now. Who were the Panther 21? What does it have to do with Tupac? I can't deny it. I'm a straight, nope. We're not talking about Tupac's music yet. This is before birth, okay? If you don't know the history of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, you're not going to get the full history here. This is the brief explanation that I gave to my students today. Very, very brief. I'd like to emphasize that their name is the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Even though they were treated as a terrorist organization that was on the offense, they were conceived of as self-defense, in particular against representation, against state-sanctioned violence from authoritarian groups like the police or the government. Okay. Briefly explained, the Black Panther Party was protecting Black people for Black power, for class equality, and for freedom from state power. Now, they did a lot of interesting things, right? Probably the most interesting is the free school breakfasts, where they really tried to reach out to the poor people and give their children food so they weren't hungry, because you can't learn if you're hungry. It's just one of those things. You can't do it. But obviously, or maybe not obviously to you, if you don't know American history, they were seen as a great threat. They were seen as a threat somewhat because of their racial ideology, fighting for African-American rights, but it was more the anti-capitalist turn of their group, the Marxist, the communist bent to their group, which was part of the reason why they were seen as being the enemy. Of course, somewhat ironically, some of the biggest defenders of the Second Amendment you could possibly have, they very much believed in the right to open, to carry weapons openly in the street. But for some reason, a lot of the people who were really in favor of the Second Amendment didn't want a bunch of Black Panthers with their berets and their black leather coats holding on to guns in the middle of the street. Can't figure out why. So Afeni Shakur was one of the New York 21 who were arrested in a raid. The FBI constantly broke into the Black Panther Party. They would hire fake members and they would infiltrate and they would divide and they would conquer and they would have rats everywhere running around telling everything. And these 22 people were accused of plotting a terrorist plot, but they got off. And if you read the accounts, Afeni Shakur represented herself and was quite good at it. She sort of She-Hulked up the whole thing. It was like a really good presence in the courtroom and was vicious. Like if you read the way she's discussed, it's clear that Tupac's wit, his ability to use his words to cut people, might have actually come from his mom, which is just a side note. A lot of people credit a lot of the wit in hip hop to the long history of the dozens, which are often your mama jokes. So here's sort of the opposite. But side note aside, she is freed. And you see this is a New York Times article, digital printout of it here by Edith Evans Asbury. from May 14th, 1971. Now, why do I keep saying that the New York 21 should be called the New York 22? Well, because Tupac was born on June 16th. Hey, everybody at home, I will let you do the math. June 16th. How long is the human gestational period for birth? 9 months. How pregnant was Afeni Shakur when she was released? The technical doctor, like the way doctors say it, is she was wicked pregnant. Okay? Very pregnant. That's why Tupac is the 22nd Black Panther. He was in utero while this was happening. She had to beg the guards to get enough nutrition to keep him alive. He might have died stillbirth in a New York prison cell for a crime that his mother was cleared of. That might have happened. You want to know the history of America? Well, here we are, okay? Tupac's entire pre-birth story is the story of the FBI and Black nationalists, but Black freedom groups and fighting against each other and the fight for equality and freedom from state power, all of it. And just a total other side note. And if you're in my class, I'm not going to test you on this guy, but this is just to illustrate the point, how much Tupac's pre-life, how much his mother's life would not only influence him, but would show the true state of things. Let's just briefly tell the story of Geronimo Pratt, who was Tupac's godfather. This American hero served 2 tours in Vietnam, won 2 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star, and 2 Purple Hearts. Went to UCLA to study political science. All good on the GI Bill. You know, that's the way things are supposed to work. But then he became a leader in the Black Panther Party. And then he got targeted by the FBI. And then he got convicted of murdering a woman in Oakland. So I guess he wasn't that good of a guy, huh? If he murdered a woman in Oakland, you know, it's just too bad, you know. Maybe it was the militants of the Black Panthers, you know. He only served 27 years of the sentence, though, his life sentence, including 8 years in solitary confinement, which is torture. 8 years of torture. He only served that much time because he was freed. It was discovered that the prosecution hid the fact that he was in Los Angeles when the murder occurred. You might not know California geography. Whatever. There's a map behind me. It's a 5-hour drive. If you're going like 80 miles per hour on Route 5/the 5. You can't be 400 miles away from somebody who you murder. You can't do it. He was innocent. He was framed. And he spent 8 years in solitary confinement, 27 years in jail. This is the world into which Tupac was born. And this is the world that I was born into, right? I mean, I'm only a couple years younger than Tupac, but I was born into the world where all these things happened, but they didn't affect me because skin color, class, privilege. But even the rappers who were born at the same time as Tupac, even people who were born into these situations, might not have been awake, might not have seen all of these things, might not have known these things because they didn't have mothers who almost gave birth to them in jail. This is the world that Tupac was born into. He was born literally in injustice, okay? I'm not going to get biblical or whatever, okay? But I don't know. I mean, as far as origin stories go, if we were to retell the story of Jesus now, I'm not saying Tupac is Jesus, but if we were to tell that story now, I don't think you could do much better than somebody almost giving birth in a prison for a crime they did not commit. You know, the sort of humility and the humbleness from whence the greatness comes. But I'm going off the rails here. Make it clear, not that this is bad. I gotta stop improvising. Born in injustice and then raised in chaos and uncertainty. So when we're like, what is it about Tupac that makes him so amazing? What is it about Tupac? Well, these are a couple of things, okay? That he was born into such injustice and that he manages to be such a bright, smiling, interesting, charismatic figure while being raised in such chaos and uncertainty. Another thing that makes Tupac it is, even though he is the face of West Coast rap and the West Side conflict, that's not who he was. That wasn't his life. He is perhaps the most American rapper. Maybe Kanye is close because he was born in Atlanta and then raised in Chicago and now lives in LA, I suppose. But in general, his life experience going from Harlem down to Baltimore to Marin County to Oakland to Los Angeles, eventually dying in Las Vegas, it's as though he is representing all of these different areas where hip hop is and was, and representing a lot of the same problems that hip hop responds to, and the ground from which hip hop arises. That's another thing that is up with what is it about Tupac? He is American. He is bi-coastal. Wait, is he the only bi-coastal rapper? Wow. I guess Ice-T, like grew up in New Jersey. I guess he's sort of a bi-coastal rapper. Tell me in the comments if you have an idea who are other bi-coastal rappers. But okay, so we have the activist, right? Raised by an activist, and we see this in his music. But the most important thing is the actor. And some of you have already written comments. Sky, how can you have never seen Juice? That is an absolute hip hop classic. You have to see it. I will. I'm going to watch it this week. The Dr. and Mrs. and I are going to watch Juice. I've watched clips from it. I know how important it is, but we're not at Juice yet. Let's talk about the actor, because the reality of Tupac, and just so you know, I'm going to be listing a whole bunch of YouTube videos, both to songs of Tupac Shakur performances and YouTube videos about Tupac. There's a great video that describes how Tupac is a better actor than he is a rapper. And I think that's a fair case to make, because he was not a trained rapper, but he was a trained actor. And it's through acting that I think we can best understand the heights, the depths, and in my opinion, the reason for the death. I believe Tupac died because he was a good actor who got lost in his role, but we're not there yet. So there he is, born in East Harlem, living in squalor, growing up in great hardship, often left to himself, mother working, kind of a precarious situation, in and out of difficulty with substance abuse. And it's at this age that he starts acting. And when I say at this age he starts acting, at the age of like 12, 13, he was on the Apollo stage in Raisin in the Sun. There he is as a little kid, okay? Like, he's a real actor. He's like a real theater kid, all right? Like, when you think about Tupac, you need to think theater kid, rapper, not thug, murderer, violence guy. Way more than Will Smith or Ice Cube, or, I mean, seriously. Okay, here's another question for you, YouTube and / students. What other rap artists were trained actors? I don't know. So there he is. And there's this quote, which I really like, that came from the video that I linked to down below. It's also, actually, 1 second. I'll be right back. I need to make a pitch. This movie, Tupac Resurrection, is the best music documentary that I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of good music documentaries, but this has the bravery to only include him speaking about himself. So this quote is also in that documentary. If you don't have Tupac Resurrection, if you've never seen it, pay the $4, okay? It's like the only good thing that MTV has done this century. When I was young, I was quiet, withdrawn. I read a lot, wrote poetry. I stayed in front of the television. It was when I was in front of the TV by myself, being all alone in the house, having to cook dinner by myself, eat by myself, just being by myself and looking at TV, at families and all these people out there in this pretend world. I thought if I could be and act like those characters, I could have some of their joy. If I could act like I had a big family, I wouldn't feel as lonely. Tupac, what is it about Tupac? One thing is he's very honest about himself and what he's doing. And he's telling you what he's doing. I'm an actor. The better I act, the more joy that I can share. The better I act, the less lonely I am. He understood sitting there watching, I believe, Different Strokes was the show he was talking about. And I want to say I relate to this, by the way. I had a very lonely childhood as well. Even though I had friends and family around, I often felt very alone, very isolated. And I watched tons of TV, hours of TV every day. And I'd watch these families and think, what are those people? How do these assholes figure it out? What's going on with me? Why can't I be like them? Tupac, baby Tupac, sees this and he says, if I can act, if I could be and act like those characters, I could have some of their joy. I think this is the instinct that is going to lead to Tupac being a great actor and ultimately to his demise. So in 1984, he moves to Baltimore. It did not mean that to rhyme. I will not rhyme anymore. He stays poor. None of that was on purpose. None of it. Anyways, prospects in Harlem were bad, so they moved to Baltimore, stays poor, attends the School of the Arts. Now, this is an important thing because Afeni Shakur had a very tough life, a very tough time, again, struggled with addiction, and yet she somehow managed to figure out how to get Tupac into a School of the Arts where he could do ballet and acting. He got to really hone his craft and really study acting. He also started rapping, in case you didn't know. His first MC name was MC New York because he moved from New York. If you're from New York City, you can go anywhere in the world and tell them you're from New York City, and they're going to think a little bit that you're cool. They're going to go, "Oh, really? Wow, the New York City, like the one from the TV." Yeah, that's how people react. And so he took that on as MC New York. There's the Baltimore School of the Arts. And there he is with his classmates. I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of the great rappers, if you had a picture of them in their high school, it would not look like this, okay? It is a very diverse, very intellectually stimulating environment, very nurturing environment. He's reading Shakespeare, he's reading poetry, he's liking Shakespeare, he's liking poetry. He has people who take an interest in him and who foster his art, who foster his craft, okay? Famously, in case you didn't know, Will Smith's future wife, Jada Pinkett, was also in class with him. And if you've never read her book about Tupac, it's very interesting. I read some excerpts, and she writes a lot of interesting things. And, it's here where he really gets into ballet. And this, I want you to have this image of Tupac, because this is just as real as the Tupac with the shirt off and the Thug Life tattoo and the little, was it Nefertiti? Who is it that he has? I think it's Nefertiti. This is also Tupac, the Tupac who finally learns how to act, And at the end of his stay in Baltimore, he's given a tragic choice. He can stay in Baltimore, okay, with a foster family. So the person who ran the school took such care, knew that Tupac was so special. You could just tell. He knew he was special. He knew he was destined for good things. And he was close to graduating, but he was going to leave to go to California, so he could move to California with his family. And it gave him a choice. He could have stayed in Baltimore with a foster family, with another family of well-intentioned, well-meaning people who would have taken him under their wing. He could have graduated high school like that. It's my opinion. This is not scientific, but had Tupac stayed in Baltimore, he would be the biggest movie star in the world right now. He would be alive. He would be happy. He would be like Timothy Chalamet multiplied by Denzel Washington. Okay. That's just what I think. Okay. Tom Cruise, like he had that kind of charisma, that kind of talent. That's what I think would have happened. But he moves to California. And when he moves to California, he moves to one of these interesting places. I used to live in the Bay Area. I lived in Oakland. I worked in sort of South Berkeley, but I lived in Oakland. And if you say Marin, if you say you're from Marin, I assume you're going to be rich because Marin County is very rich. That's where George Lucas lives and where the Grateful Dead live. And it's like the richest part of the Bay Area. But Marin City is a small city within Marin County that is not like that. Okay. So here he's still in hardship. He keeps acting, but unfortunately his mother's addiction to crack worsens. Okay. In this class, we've been talking so much about the crack epidemic, and how perfect is it that somebody who fought so hard against white supremacy and fought so hard for Black liberation ends up succumbing to this disease that has swept the country, that was either supported by or tacitly accepted by the government. It's something else. He dabbles in crime. I think this is important because later, as he takes on the thug, the gangster personality, I think this is important, that he's dabbling in crime, not a big criminal, but he dabbles in crime because he's fairly poor and he drops out of high school. I read an interview with him. He dropped out of high school for like the stupidest reason. Like he just had to do like one more gym class. God. He ended up getting a GED. That's Tupac. But the thing is, let's watch this, okay? This is a video from the historic film stock. This is an interview, a 36-minute interview with Tupac when he was 17 years old. Listen, I have a kid who's 17 years old. I was 17 years old. I teach 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. I don't see kids this smart. I don't. Look at this kid and tell me this is a college dropout. Look at the way he talks about his upbringing, about his life, his charisma, his poise. Okay?
Just to end the importance of growing up just growing up in America. I loved my childhood, but I hated growing up poor, and it made me very bitter. It's like, all right, now I got a job. I had to quit now. I had a job, and just today I got paid, and I had money in my pocket that I worked for, and that greatest feeling, that I worked for. I'm just getting a job and I'm working and everything. That feels good, but I'm still poor. My family is still poor. I'm still living in a poor neighborhood. I still see people poor. I still see things that, like, society this is supposed to be a melting pot, but no one's learning from the other's mistake.
You can just watch this. It's amazing. First of all, he's wearing friendship bracelets, which you tell me how many rap artists can pull off a friendship bracelet, but his awareness of his own state, his awareness, is almost like a Bernie Sanders stump speech, like I'm working and I'm making money, but I'm still poor. He's describing the problem of the wealth gap. He's describing it so clearly, right? That's the guy who drops out of high school. That's the guy who doesn't get a high school degree. What is it about Tupac? Whatever it is, he's like always had it. He's trained as an actor. Is he just acting? Is he just acting like a really considerate kid? He's acting like a smart, sensitive kid in a leotard who can dance and talk about Shakespeare? It's hard to tell. I don't think so. I think that's really who he was. Now, here's the question that I ask my students. According to Tupac, does an artist have to tell the truth? In one of my favorite interviews from Tupac, he explains that an artist does not need to tell the truth. And if I could say one thing about Tupac, what is it about Tupac? It's that he is music's greatest actor. Because a good actor lies. They portray something that they are not. And in their portrayal, they communicate truth. Through that lie, they get to other truths. Okay? That's what Tupac did. Now, of course, he also talked about his truth. He talked about reality. It's not like his mom wasn't really a crack addict. It's not like he didn't live any of the things that he'd rap about or talk about. But I think the way to think about what is it about Tupac is that he tells us these truths while always being able to take on another face, another guise. So jumping ahead with his acting, there's some stuff here we'll get to later, but the most important role that he stars is Bishop in Juice. In my class, I showed a clip of this. I don't know what YouTube's going to do, so I'm not going to show it. I'll just show you the meme. But the thing that Jada Pinkett says before she was Jada Pinkett Smith, I'm trying to keep her name out of my mouth, but I think I'm okay, is that he would like stay in character. Like he would do little jokes. He would like do joke characters, but he wouldn't get out of character. And that video that I linked, that's pretty good about his acting, makes a point which I've already had, but I agree with. I think he stays in character too much. I think playing this role taught him something about who he could be, how he could be perceived, as opposed to the sensitive kid talking about poverty and smiling. He could be a menacing character. He could be Bishop. So you can follow that link. I'm putting all these links in the description below. If you're one of my students, you have to watch those videos. So enjoy. If you're one of my auditors, hey, check it out. This is a meme from the scene that I'm linking to, but I think it's an important one because in this scene, Bishop is explaining how he is crazy because he doesn't give a fuck about anybody, about anything, about himself. He thinks that he is nothing. He says, I am nothing. And the way that he acts it, everything's so over the top, but you feel it. It's real. He's able to communicate his own feeling of worthlessness through this character. And even though he's not a killer and a murderer, he's not Bishop. He's not Bishop. He is Bishop. The Bishop inside him is that part that feels worthless. And that part which during many times in his life, due to the injustice, due to the feeling of abandonment, due to the feeling of just poverty and just trying to scrape by and being surrounded by people who he perceives of and who actually are enemies and adversaries, it leaves him to the state of advanced nihilism. I don't give a fuck. To a certain extent, that is Tupac's lasting legacy. My attitude is fuck it because motherfuckers love it. That's part of his. What is it about Tupac? It's that he cared so much. He cared so much about issues and brought up so many issues that you couldn't possibly believe, and you totally believe that he totally means those issues, and he wants to talk about women's rights and about inequality and the problems with the government. At the same time, you believe equally that deep down, he doesn't give a fuck. What is it about Tupac? I don't know anyone else who can incarnate those two values so well. According to Tupac, does an artist have to tell the truth? He was also rapping at this time. I'm tempted to show you this link, but definitely follow this link here. I'll include it in the description. Where you see his earliest recorded rap performance in 1989. He's 17 years old, 18 years old. It's purely political. He's talking about how the government wants to keep him enslaved and they want to hide his history from him. It's very much of its time, but it's entirely political. It is entirely conscious rap music. Although Tupac is largely thought of now as one of the gods of gangster rap, he is absolutely a god of conscious rap as well. Going back to those same kind of questions of the polarity, the part of him that really cares, that was the conscious part of him. And then the part of him that was, I don't give a fuck. That was the part of him that was the gangster. Now, when it comes to rap music, this is the main reason we have to thank him joining into the rap game. You can see him down there, but no more redirect. You can see him down there. He was a roadie for Digital Underground. Okay. It was thanks to Digital Underground that he had his first verse in a rap song, his first cameo in a movie, the movie Nothing But Trouble, which is probably the second. There's 3 movies that I hate. Texas Chainsaw Massacre from like 2014. No, 2010, something like that. Running with Scissors and Nothing But Trouble. Those are the three movies that I just hate more than anything, and Tupac was in one of them. That's the only Tupac movie I've seen. Maybe that's why I've never seen Juice. I'll never forgive him for that. But it's interesting because he came up as a roadie, and he was really helped by the guy in the middle there, Shock G, who is most famous for the Humpty Dance. He passed recently, which is sad. He's so much more than the Humpty Dance, but he helped to sort of usher Tupac into this. He got the role in Juice because a different member of the group was auditioning for the same role. So, that's really how he got started up until he released his first two solo albums. Now, I'm going to group these together fairly quickly. Tupacalypse Now from 91 and Strictly for My NAGGAZ from 1993. They're very similar, I'd say, in the way they sound. They're both very political, highly political. They are conscious rap albums. Okay. The same time, he does also say, I just don't give a fuck. I often wonder if the song I Don't Give a Fuck influenced the character Bishop, or if the character Bishop influenced the song I Just Don't Give a Fuck. Either way, anti-police, anti-government. And all these, he tells the truth of the streets, the truth of Black America. But at the same time, he also talks a lot about being a womanizer. And this is the sort of less savory side of Tupac. He had an amazing power on women. He was so charismatic. He was so attractive. But at the same time, he raps a lot about being a womanizer, and he will often use denigrating terms towards women. And he will use the sort of tired and common refrain of many gangster rappers who are just like, I'm not saying all women are like that, but the women that are like that are like that. And if I call them that, then there's nothing wrong, right? But obviously, it's confusing because he's a storyteller, and a lot of the stories that he tells are feminist stories. He's the best feminist male rapper. Okay? And if you know the story of Tupac, that's a weird thing to say considering why he went to jail. Okay? But as far as a rapper who talks and empathizes with women and their struggle and the inequality that they suffer, who does a better job than Tupac? Okay? I realize, why is it that I never really listened to Tupac? I don't like the production on most of his stuff. And a lot of it's by Shock G, who I respect, but just the production, I don't know. And you can tell me in the comments, like, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me some Tupac song where the production is even a tenth as good as the rapping. That's probably why I ended up sort of picking Biggie in that sort of false dichotomy, right? Was because his beats were usually half as good as his rhymes. But hey, Shock G, there he is again. And we sort of look at examples. The first single off his first album is called Trapped, and we're talking about how unbelievably political he is. They got me trapped in this prison of seclusion. And there's a link to in the description. If you're in my class, you must watch this video. They got me trapped in this prison of seclusion. Happiness living on the streets is a delusion. Even a smooth criminal must one day get caught, shot up or shot down with a bullet that he bought, 9mm kicking, thinking about what the streets do to me, because they never talk about peace in the Black community. All we know is violence, do the job in silence. So it's a very conscious indictment of the criminal justice system, and it's talking about the feeling that he has had being trapped in American society. Perhaps the most famous song of the first album is Brenda's Got a Baby, which he took from a story that he read about a 12-year-old girl who'd been molested and had a baby at the age of 12 and had this really tough life. And this is that sort of other side of Tupac where he's being very empathetic and telling stories that just weren't told, like a truly meaningful, touching story that just is not told. Now, my students had to read an entire article about this song, and they had to write up their thoughts. You can do that in the comments if you want, but I'm not going to make you do that. I'm not grading most of you. Or in the second album, Keep Your Head Up, this ode to Black womanhood that I wonder why we take from our women, why we rape our women, why do we hate our women? I think it's time to kill for our women, time to heal our women, be real to our women. And if we don't And if we don't, we'll have a race of babies that will hate the ladies that make the babies. And since a man can't make one, he has no right to tell a woman when and where to create one. So women get, okay, so he's making an argument. He's making a pro-choice argument in the middle of a rap song. Okay, this is what we're talking about. What is it about Tupac? Why is he so important? Well, this is a big reason. If you just know the ambitions as a writer and California, it's this other side too, where he's actually writing anthems for people who do not have anthems written for them, people who are forgotten. That's what Tupac is doing. But the thing is, fame got to him. Pressure got to him. The need to be a certain way got to him. Womanizing got to him. The life of sex and drugs and rock and rap really got to him. And we really see that in 1994, where this I don't give a fuck attitude appears to be seeping into every single thing that he's doing, to where perhaps he becomes more like Bishop and less like that sweet kid that we saw. Just so you know, that sweet kid that we saw in that interview, that was at Tamalpais High School. That's when he's already in Marin. That's already when he already started doing some little minor crimes. That's already when he was in the school he wouldn't graduate from. But that sweet kid, he's not always there. Sometimes he's this guy. So in 1994, previous year, he had shot up some off-duty cops, had no jail time. Did you hear that? He shot police officers and didn't go to jail. People make like Chuck Norris jokes. I think we should make Tupac Shakur jokes, He punched a film director, one of the Hughes brothers, which is sad. By the way, speaking of movies, if you've never seen the movie Dead Presidents by the Hughes brothers, that is one of the greatest movies of the 90s. It is a masterpiece of crime. It's a masterpiece of a crime movie and social commentary, and about the nature of African Americans in the 70s in America and the way they were treated. Dead Presidents, Hughes brothers, absolutely watch it. Anyways, Tupac punched one of them. I forget which one. He served a couple weeks in jail for assault. Again, you watch interviews with him. He's like, you should just think about if it's worth punching a guy, because if you just punch a guy, that's called assault. But then, of course, he went on trial for rape. But we get back to this confusing thing where he says, why do we rape our women? Why do we hate our women? And then he's accused of rape. I'm not going to get into the details of this case. It is a complicated case. No, I don't know if it's complicated, but the woman who was involved was in a consensual relationship with him previously, and he did not go to jail for rape. He did go to jail for sexual abuse. Obviously, I'm not a judge or whatever it is, but just when you hear the word like put on trial for rape, you assume, oh, that might mean that. No, he was judged innocent of that, but he was judged guilty of something else. But also, this is around the time where his friendship broke up, his friendship with Notorious B.I.G. Okay. Quad Studios, Times Square, New York City. This is the day before he's about to be sentenced. Okay. Look over there. Do you see little M&Ms? Next time you go to Times Square, first of all, don't go to Times Square. There's nothing to do there. It's boring. But if you do, avoid the Elmos and then go to the M&M store and then look right next to it, because there you will see Quad Studios, where Notorious B.I.G. was recording one day. Biggie was in the studio. Tupac was in the lobby. Tupac was robbed and shot in the lobby. You can go there and visit right now instead of waiting in line to go to the M&M store. While he was being carted off, of course, he flipped off the cameras. And the truth is, he was probably, according to people who study these things, he was probably set up by this guy, Haitian Jack, who was sort of a friend and an associate of his. But he blames these two guys who are in the studio, Notorious B.I.G. and Puffy. And it was one day before the sentencing. So listen, I've had a bad couple months here, but Tupac had a really bad couple months. He's sentenced to 1.5 to 4.5 years in jail for sexual assault a day after he'd been shot. He's wearing a New York Yankees hat. Okay, when we're talking about, West Coast and all that. He's wearing a Yankees hat. Okay. MC New York. But he's wearing the hat because he had a head wound. Okay. So he's having this kind of really, really crazy, rough time. February 1995, he is in jail. Why is this picture? Look at this picture. It looks like it's from like the 30s, right? It's crazy. February 1995, he goes to jail. March 1995, he releases probably his best album, Me Against the World. Much better production throughout, much better rapping. Still quite conscious. Okay. He's not going into full kind of gangster mode, but it's also a lot about his anger and enemies and adversaries. One of my biggest problems with Tupac is that I do think he's a great rapper, but it seems like every song he's always talking about his enemies, adversaries. But this is part of his sort of worldview, the way things are changing, the way things are shaping up. He's seeing he's in jail. He feels like he's being set up, and he's quite angry. And he's obsessed with death. Kind of bring all this together. We can listen to this song. You can't, but I'm not going to play it because YouTube and the copyright goblins. But this is one of those. I'll include a link to this thing where they highlight the rhymes. We see that his rhyme game is getting more interesting. He is very good at alliteration. That is one of his primary tools here. If I die tonight, obsessed with death. They say pussy, a paper, poetry, power, and pistols, plotting on murdering motherfuckers before they get you. You know, like the rhymes are richer. There's more internal rhymes. It's better delivered. We see a sort of development of his style here. And of course, this is the album that contains the song Dear Mama. So the first time I ever intentionally listened to Tupac was back in 2000. And it was when I was teaching English in a French high school, Lycée Saint-Charles in Marseille, France. And I was an English assistant, 22 years old, right? Young guy. And I said, what do you want to learn about? Anything. Anything you want me to know? And it wasn't in the best part of Marseille. Marseille is a pretty tough city. So the kid said, teacher Tupac. And I said, all right. I went to the FNAC, the local record store, the French national chain, and I bought Me Against the World. And I developed my first ever lesson plan. My first lesson plan as a teacher, I'd never taught a second in my life, was on the song Dear Mama by Tupac. The first question I was ever asked by a student, yes, Skyrock, what is beef? And I had to explain what beef is, because the first line is, when I was younger, me and my mama had beef. So that was my introduction to Tupac, and I didn't even really understand how great it was because I was just a young idiot, you know? I didn't have YouTubers like me to explain why Tupac is so interesting. And the thing is, this song has such emotional heart. It's a song all about his mother and his love and his appreciation and his wonder at his mother. And it contains this true depth, but most importantly, this revolutionary vulnerability. It's the vulnerability that kills me. This is the thing. How many times have I said, what is it about Tupac? Well, what it is about Tupac is that there's so many things that it is. And one of them is this vulnerability. And was it just an act to get people to like him more? No, it could have been, but he's being honest. Rap music, the main issue, I think, emotionally for rap music, spiritually for rap music, is that it often has a sort of tough guy imposed limit. It has a restrictor plate on emotions. You can't get too real. You have to stay hard all the time, because if you're not hard, you're going to slip and the streets are going to kill you, right? So you can't sit there and say, so you go on your own and you leave on your own and you go home and you cry and you want to die. You know, you can't do that. You can't do that on the streets. You can't go home and cry and you want to die in the streets, because you go home and cry and you want to die in the streets and you get killed on the streets. And that's just hard times. Okay. Tupac managed to be so hard and so tough while at the same time having this kind of revolutionary vulnerability. That's what he brought. And I'm such an idiot for not getting it earlier, okay? But what do I know? You know, this is why I'm learning. This is why teachers learn. That's why teachers are not smart because they know everything. They're smart because they keep learning, right? And I finally understand, like, that was the thing. Like, I gave too much credit to Kanye for the vulnerability aspect of hip hop, sort of expanding the emotional range. I think it really was this song that really helped to expand the range of emotions. It's an honest portrait and it's inherently political because the problems that Afeni faced were often consequences of neglect from the state or active interference from the state. And we have these lyrics. And even as a crack fiend mama, you always was a black queen mama. If you didn't grow up in the 80s, you don't know what it was like, but representations of black women in the media were all the same. Just image after image after image of crack-headed women with crack babies, which turns out wasn't really a thing. Look it up. There's interesting studies. But the image of black women in the media and in America was so unbelievably negative. Of course, there were some outliers, you know, Felicia Rashad's character on the Cosby Show, or Jada Pinkett, for that matter, on A Different World. Sadly, a serial rapist was largely responsible for a lot of this positive imagery. Just can't do everything wrong. There are a lot of good things about Cosby as well. But this line, even as a crack fiend, you always was a black queen. First of all, this is, it's multi-syllabic rhyme, crack fiend, black queen, right? But creating this equivalence, this amazing humanization that makes you feel like every single crackhead that you've seen, that reminds you that they're a human being. And a crackhead, we've seen in this class, they're called baseheads, they're called fiends, they're called cluckers, they're called all these things. None of them are called human beings. But Tupac is able to say, you always was a black queen. Not after a crack fiend, even as a crack fiend, her humanity was that strong. Her humanity could not be killed by one of the most pernicious forces in American history. Okay? I'm getting legitimate goosebumps here because that's how good this is. That's how powerful this is. I finally understand, for a woman, it ain't easy trying to raise a man. You always was committed, a poor single mother on welfare. Tell me how you did it. Tell me how you did it. He's in awe of her. I get it. I get it. My students were right. Tupac is a thing to study, is a thing to love. And then we get the villain. So the other part about Tupac's life is it's so cinematic. He died at 25. 25, okay? Okay. Oh, the 27 Club. Look at what Hendrix did between 25 and 27. Okay. Look at what Cobain did between 25 and 27. Okay. It is a big deal to die at 25 instead of 27, obviously, instead of being alive, right? And this figure of Suge Knight is a crucial one. Now, if you're not in my class, you haven't watched the video about Death Row, maybe I'll release that to my Patreons or something. But Suge Knight was the criminal slash businessman at the head of Death Row Records. They were the ones who produced The Chronic by Dr. Dre, the first album by Snoop Doggy Dogg, the biggest record. They were the ones who were responsible for the G-Funk sound. They were responsible for the West Coast taking over as the center of rap. And Suge Knight was a legitimate criminal who was also a very savvy businessman. And one of the savviest things that he did was he bailed Tupac out of jail. So Tupac only served 9 months. Criminal justice system will always be tilted in favor of those with money. And at the same time, he signs to Death Row Records. Interscope, his label, didn't know what to do with him, so he signed to Death Row Records. And he becomes immediately the center of the East Coast, West Coast rap war. Why? Because during those 9 months, the East Coast, West Coast rap war exploded. Seriously, it's like a movie. It's unbelievable, this terrible role that Tupac played at the end. Here we're talking about the Source Awards. Okay, the 1995 Source Awards, which we will also talk about when we're talking about Outkast when we get back from break. The 1995 Source Awards are probably the most important televised moment in rap history for multiple reasons. One of them was Suge Knight showing up wearing his gang colors, wearing the colors of the Bloods, saying the following words to the audience of New York. To all you artists out there who don't want to be on a record label, we're the executive producers, all up in the videos, all on the records, dancing. Then come to death row. He's making a direct attack at Puff Daddy and Notorious B.I.G. Okay. Tupac's in jail at this moment, but he must know of this. He must like this, attacking Biggie and Puff, who he thought were responsible for setting him up. And here he is going into New York, trying to poach artists from Bad Boy Records, from East Coast record labels. Okay. Later, Snoop Doggy Dogg wins the award for Best Artist of the Year, and he famously doesn't understand why they're booing. The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. You have to watch the clip someday, how mad he is. The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row. Okay? Y'all don't love us? He's legitimately confused. He does not understand. And even at the end, he says, we know where we are, East Coast in the house. He's not trying to inflame these things. And to his credit, when Puffy comes up and gives his little speech, he says, I'm the executive producer. A comment was made about a little bit earlier, but check this out. Contrary to what other people may feel, I'd like to say I'm very proud of Dr. Dre, of Death Row, and Suge Knight for their accomplishments. All this East-West, that needs to stop. But this is the important thing. Tupac is now on death row. And sadly, it's like actual death row. Like, I believe, and I don't think this is that scandalous, his participation in death row will directly lead to his actual death. Like, he's actually on death row. He's on death row and he's on death row. He just doesn't know when his last meal is going to be. He's with Snoop Dogg. He's with Dr. Dre, and he's with Suge Knight. So here's an image of Tupac when he becomes a gangster rapper. He's bitter from being in jail. He's convinced that East Coast rappers tried to kill him. And I think he finds something of a father figure in Suge Knight. Someone who brings out his worst instincts. Someone who encourages him to make a song, Hit 'Em Up, where he insults Notorious B.I.G. and jokes about sleeping with his wife. Someone who encourages his violence. Okay. It's worth mentioning here he's wearing two different bandanas. His group, Thug Life, earlier had a lot of members who were members of the Crips, and now he's representing the Bloods, because this is the thing. He's not a gangster. He's not. He never was. Not a gangster. He's MC New York from Baltimore. Okay? That's who he is. It's cosplay. Cosplay. According to Tupac, does an artist have to tell the truth? Which one of these is the real Tupac? The guy wearing gang colors, ready to go to jail, get into a fight over anything? Or the aspiring young kid performing ballet and thinking of a life on the stage? Which one of those is the real Tupac? They're both the real Tupac. That's the whole point. That's the idea. They're both different roles that he knows how to play. And in both roles, he's able to communicate his brilliance, his artistic genius, and his fragility. Interview with him at the time from Los Angeles Times. Some people say you glorify drug dealing and gang violence. And he says, let me say for the record, I'm not a gangster, never have been. I'm not the guy who grabs your purse. I'm not the guy who jacks your car. I'm not down with people who steal and hurt others. I'm just a brother who fights back. I'm not some violent closet psycho. I've got a job. I'm an artist. But it's interesting, you know, when we think about his famous tattoo, Thug Life, often imitated, he gave the explanation earlier that stands for the hate you give little infants fucks everyone. And I think that's an amazing concept, right? Because obviously it reminds us of Tupac as an infant, and a hated infant. He was a hated infant. His mother was a hated mother. He was literally born into a world that was trying to snuff out his existence and keep his mother in jail. Okay? That was the life he was born into. And the hate that you give infants does fuck everyone, does mess up the world, does turn people into people who you call thugs or criminals. But as time goes on, the Thug Life tattoo represents less of that and represents more of what you're thinking of with the thug. It represents being a gangster, you know, a song that I would play in class. But again, I don't have time. I don't have the ability to hear. But Two of America's Most Wanted, featuring Snoop Doggy Dogg, where they just sing Ain't Nothing But a Gangster Party, showing the West Coast gang, not gang sign, but the West Coast hand sign. He's calling himself a gangster. It's worth mentioning that this is a double album. The first major double album in rap history. And the reason it's a double album is because he got out of jail and because he thought he was going to get killed. And he just had to release everything. That's why there's 6 albums after death. Okay. He got super prolific. He is an artist. He was working. It just, he happened to have this persona that was super kind of gangster. You know, the West Coast sign isn't a specific gang sign, but he's flashing it as though it is a gang, as in the gang of the West Coast rappers. Okay. He has a gang like Medallion, a medallion that represents the Death Row Clique, which did often act like a gang. And this might be a stretch, but the fact that it's in red is a gang color title. Okay. And then if we take, you know, my personal favorite song ever by Tupac, My Ambitions as a Rider, link in the description. He says, I won't deny it. I'm a straight rider. You don't want to with me. Got the police busting at me, but they can't do nothing to a G. Okay, he's calling himself a G. The interview, I'm not a gangster. Here, I am a gangster. You can't do anything to me. So many battlefield scars while driven in plush cars. The life of a rap star, nothing without guards. Was born rough and rugged, addressing the mass public. My attitude was fuck it because motherfuckers love it. My attitude is fuck it because motherfuckers love it. First of all, one of my top 5 favorite lines in rap history, but also it shows his attitude was dependent on the audience, because if he acts in a certain way, he won't be lonely. Okay. He's still the kid standing in front of TV looking at Gary Coleman as Arnold Drummond. Okay. He's still figuring out how to be. How can I act that people will give me love and respect? Well, it turns out talking about societal injustice doesn't quite work. You want to get people to love it? Your attitude's got to be fuck it. My attitude is fuck it because motherfuckers love it. The most famous song on the album, California Love, out of bail, fresh out of jail, California dreaming, talking about his life. He shows like this ambition on here. And this might be the point where you might say, was he killed over the East Coast, West Coast beef? He's participating in it. He's doing the hand signs. He's doing the whole thing. He's doing the video where the video for 2 of America's Most Wanted makes fun of Notorious B.I.G. by calling him Piggy and shows him as being weak and responsible for the... No. He was just lost in his role. That's it. He got out of jail. He got hardened. He got scared. He got in with the wrong crowd. He got in with Bloods, with gangsters. This is where I want Ice-T to interject, okay? Ice-T, the first West Coast gangster rapper, has this amazing interview with Holden Court podcast, which I really suggest you watch. I will put a link to it down here. And he explains how he was trying to stop Tupac from messing around with gangs, because Tupac was messing around like it was some kind of game. But as Ice-T would say, these guys don't make records. They don't take this lightly. You've got to stop messing around with the gangs. Here's Ice-T talking about it.
You know, and I believe that, and you won't just hear me say that. You'll hear a lot of West Coasters say the same thing, that, you know, anyone that, I'll tell you to anybody, if you're not from LA, don't fuck with the gangs. If you come to LA and you decide, oh, I'm just going to move into Hollywood Hills, and you meet some Crips, or you meet some Bloods, or you meet some Pirus, or you meet some MS-13s, it's not the best idea to become friends and hang out with them or jump into that gang.
Exactly.
You know, it's just not the best idea. So, I mean, I miss Pac and I love Pac, you know, but
would you think he was angry at you for not jumping out there with him?
Nah, he wasn't really angry. He was maybe just like, come on. He just felt like he didn't have any animosity towards me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have it. When I'm saying I'm angry, I'm just mad. Have you ever been mad somebody died?
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
I'm not.
sure.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I miss him.
Yeah.
It's like he made some mistakes.
Right.
So, I've said it and people, oh, I guess they take it wrong.
So this is it. Don't go to LA and mess around with gangs. What killed Tupac was he went to LA and he messed around with gangs. If you don't know the story, guy on the left, Orlando Anderson, was a member of the Crips, and he was at a mall and he robbed a death row necklace off of somebody's neck. And Death Row is very affiliated with the Bloods because Suge Knight was affiliated with the Bloods. That's his club in Las Vegas, Club 662, which on a phone spells out MOB, member of Bloods. Okay, that's the whole idea. He would always wear red, and his entire offices would be surrounded by different gangbangers. Okay, so on the night of his death, September 7th, the night of his shooting, September 7th, 1995, right? 96, sorry. September, yeah, because he died when I was a freshman in college, and I took, yes, 96. Sorry, I'd remember exactly when he died. So that happened because after the Mike Tyson fight, Tupac Shakur saw Orlando Anderson, and he was part of the crew that beat him up. He thought he'd be one of those guys. He thought, I'm one of you guys. I'm a blood guy. Yeah, he's against our gang. I'm going to fight him and beat him down. Okay, he took it too far. He took the role too far. He got into a fist fight with a gang member on behalf of a different gang. He died. He was shot down the same night in this car being driven by Suge Knight on the way to the club, to the 662 club in Las Vegas after the fight. Okay. What killed him was he got too into his role. And the thing that drives me crazy is after he died, everybody acted like he died because his music was violent. Like, look at this terrible, this offensive obituary. Rap performer who personified violence. You've been watching this video. Did he personify violence? Was that his thing, personifying violence? Anyways, what are you gonna do? There he is a couple weeks before his death. Even in his gangster phase, he's here trying to get the vote out from 1996 to fight against the 3 strikes law in California. He was into prison reform. This is from the book by Ben Westhoff, Original Gangsters, where he says the closest musical equivalent is Bob Dylan. He may not be the best technically at his craft, but there's something true about him, something that hits you right there. Tupac brought life experience of being desperate, black, and poor. He didn't judge criminals, gangbangers, anyone doing what they needed to do. He spoke out against the U.S. 1994 crime bill signed by Bill Clinton, now seen as a fear-driven mistake that drove us to historically high incarceration rates. When asked by Vibes Kevin Powell why so many young African Americans identified with him, Tupac said, because we all soldiers, unfortunately, everyone's at war with different things, with ourselves, some at war with the establishment, some of us at war with our own communities. According to Tupac, doesn't artists always have to tell the truth? I like the Dylan comparison because Dylan lies all the time and Dylan always tells the truth. It's a very similar thing. And like Dylan, it's true. He is not the best at his craft. So there you go. What is it about Tupac? I can't even summarize everything I just said. I've been talking for so long. There's so many things about Tupac. So you tell me in the comments, what is it about Tupac for you that makes him so great, that makes him so meaningful? All right. If you were in my class today, I didn't get to all this, by the way. It took way too long. There's a lot to talk about. All right, until next time, there's the camera.